The man in the black ski mask racked the slide of his silver pistol, pointed it directly at the ceiling of the bus, and screamed at us to put our heads between our knees, completely unaware that he had just hijacked District 4's highest security alternative transport for violent juvenile offenders. I had transferred to Woodlock Alternative High School about 3 months ago, and you need to understand that you don't go to Woodlock for skipping class, failing math, or talking back to a substitute teacher. You go to Woodlock when the normal high schools are absolutely terrified of you. Every single kid sitting on bus 47 had a disciplinary record longer than a CVS receipt. Sitting in the very back row was Marcus, a 6'4", 240-pound linebacker who was expelled from his last school for literally throwing a school security guard through a plate glass window because the guard tried to take his headphones. Next to him was Chloe, a dead quiet girl who never looked up from her screen, who was currently facing federal charges for hacking the district's banking system and transferring the superintendent's entire yearly salary to a local animal shelter. Then there was Jax, a kid who got caught running a highly profitable underground fight club in his middle school basement, and me. I was in this bus because I broke a grown man's jaw in 3 different places after he tried to put his hands on my little sister at a park. We were considered absolute monsters to the education system. We were the throwaways. But we had one weakness, and her name was Mrs. Higgins. Mrs. Higgins was our bus driver. She was a frail, 72-year-old grandmother with silver hair, thick prescription glasses, and a heart of pure gold. While the rest of the world treated us like future convicts crossing the street, once as they saw us coming, Mrs. Higgins treated us like we were her own grandchildren. Every single Friday, without fail, she woke up at 4:09 a.m. to bake us homemade chocolate chip cookies. If it was raining, she kept a stash of extra umbrellas in a crate up front so we wouldn't get wet. If one of us got on the bus with a black eye from a weekend fight, she'd silently hand us an ice pack and quietly remind us that we were better than our anger. She was the only adult in the entire state of California who actually cared if we lived or died. And today was Friday. It was Cookie Day. We were stopped at a red light on 5th Avenue, notoriously one of the worst parts of the city, when the emergency doors violently hissed open. A guy wearing a heavy leather jacket and a black ski mask stormed up the steps, completely out of breath. He had that silver pistol shaking in his right hand and a faded duffel bag in his left. "Nobody move! This is a hijacking!" he screamed, his voice cracking slightly with pure adrenaline. "Driver, shut the doors and hit the gas right now!" Everyone else, phones, watches, and wallets in the bag. Usually, when a grown man with a loaded gun screams on a bus full of teenagers, kids cry. They panic. They dive under the seats and beg for their lives. But on bus 47, nobody even flinched. Marcus slowly looked up from his comic book, popping a bubble with his gum, looking mildly annoyed that the loud noise interrupted his reading. Chloe didn't even stop typing on her heavily encrypted laptop. Jax leaned his head against the cold glass window and sighed heavily, like he was just incredibly tired of dealing with amateurs. The hijacker clearly noticed the absolute lack of panic, and it confused him. He aimed his gun down the center aisle, his hand shaking even worse now. "Did you hear me?" I said. "Put your phones in the bag." Jax slowly reached into his pocket, pulled out 3 different burner phones, and casually tossed them into the bag. "Which one you want, bro? The one the feds are currently tapping? The one my parole officer tracks? Or the one I used to call my grandma?" The hijacker blinked hard behind his mask, taking a step back. "What?" Before he could process it, a skinny kid named Toby spoke up from the 3rd row. "I only have 80 cents on me," Toby said deadpan, "but I have a stolen Rolex in my backpack if you want that instead." The hijacker realized he was rapidly losing control of the room. He stomped his heavy boot on the rubber floor to try and assert dominance. "Shut up, all of you! Shut up, right now!" He turned his weapon away from us and pointed it directly at the front seat. "Driver!" I said, "Hit the gas. Take the highway out of the city, or I swear to God, I'll shoot you right here." The entire bus went dead silent. The temperature in the room felt like it dropped 10 degrees in a single second. Up until this exact moment, we genuinely just thought this guy was an idiot. We were perfectly fine letting him steal our burner phones, our fake IDs, and whatever loose change we had. But he just aimed a loaded weapon at Mrs. Higgins. He crossed the one line you absolutely do not cross on Bus 47. Mrs. Higgins, her frail hands trembling visibly on the large steering wheel, softly said, "Please, sir, these are just children. Take my purse, take whatever you want, but let them go." "I don't want your purse, old lady," he yelled, taking an aggressive step closer to her. But as he stepped forward, his heavy boot accidentally kicked the large plastic Tupperware containers sitting next to her seat. The lid popped off, and 24 perfectly baked, still warm chocolate chip cookies spilled all over the dirty, muddy rubber floor of the bus. "Mrs. Higgins gasped, a single tear rolling down her wrinkled cheek. "Oh, I baked those for the kids." I looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at Jax. Jax looked at Chloe. We didn't need to speak a single word. We had spent the last 3 months surviving the absolute worst juvenile detention centers in the state. We knew how to communicate without making a sound. Chloe's fingers flew across her keyboard at lightning speed. I didn't know exactly what she was doing, but within 10 seconds, the hijacker's police scanner, which he had clipped to his belt to track the cops, started emitting a deafening, high-pitched screech. "What the?" The hijacker dropped his duffel bag and frantically tried to turn the radio off, grabbing his ear in pain. "Hey, ski mask," Marcus said from the very back of the bus. His voice was deep, incredibly calm, and terrifyingly steady. The hijacker spun around, aiming the gun at Marcus. "Sit down, kid. Don't move." Marcus slowly stood up. At 6'4" and pure muscle, his head almost touched the metal roof of the bus. "You stepped on the cookies." "I'm going to count to 3, the hijacker screamed, backing up. He was finally realizing that the kids looking back at him didn't have a single ounce of fear in their eyes. They had the eyes of apex predators. 1, Marcus mocked, taking a slow, deliberate step down the aisle. "Stay back," the hijacker yelled. 2, Jax whispered, sliding silently out of his seat and flanking the left aisle, completely out of the man's peripheral vision. "I'll do it. I swear I'll shoot." Before the hijacker could even form the word 3, Chloe hit a button on her laptop. The bus's internal lights violently flickered, and the automated voice system blared over the speakers at maximum volume. "Warn. Engine overheating. Warning." The sudden loud noise made the hijacker flinch and look up at the speaker for exactly 1/10 of a second. That was all the time we needed. I vaulted completely over the seat in front of me, wrapping my arm tightly around his neck from behind in a textbook sleeper hold. At the exact same moment, Jack swept the guy's legs out from under him with a brutal kick to the knees. The hijacker hit the floor of the bus so hard the windows rattled in their frames. The silver pistol slid across the floor. Toby, the kid with the stolen Rolex, casually placed his foot over the weapon, picked it up, popped the magazine out, cleared the chamber with practiced efficiency, and tossed the empty gun out the window into moving traffic like it was a piece of trash. The hijacker scrambled frantically, trying to throw a wild punch over his shoulder at me. But Marcus was already there. Marcus didn't even bother throwing a punch. He just placed one massive, heavy hand on the center of the man's chest and pressed down. The hijacker gasped for air, pinned to the floor like a bug under a brick. "Please," the man choked out, his tough guy persona completely evaporating the second he realized how outmatched he was. "I'm sorry, take the bag, just let me go." "You yelled at Mrs. Higgins," Jack said, kneeling down right next to his ear, "and you ruined Cookie Day." What happened over the next 10 minutes was an absolute masterclass in psychological and physical dismantling. We didn't just beat him up, we used our specific skill sets. Toby used his pickpocketing skills to completely empty the man's pockets, taking his wallet, his keys, his social security card, and even a picture of his dog. Chloe found the guy's phone, hacked into his social media accounts, and live-streamed him crying on the floor of the bus to his own followers. We used the heavy-duty zip ties he brought to kidnap us, to tie his hands tightly behind his back. Then we tied his ankles together using the shoelaces from his own combat boots. Once he was securely tied into a helpless little ball, we dragged him to the back row and shoved him under the seats. "Mrs. Higgins?" I asked, walking up to the front of the bus. "Are you okay?" She was clutching her chest, looking at us with wide, shocked eyes. But then, she looked down at the ruined cookies on the floor. "I'm fine, sweetie. I'm just so sorry about your treats." "Don't worry about it," Marcus grunted from the back. He had found a hidden stash of powdered donuts inside the hijacker's duffel bag. He passed them around the bus. "These will do." 20 minutes later, 3 police cruisers and a massive SWAT van surrounded our bus on the highway. They had been tracking the hijacked bus on GPS and were fully expecting a bloodbath. They set up a tactical perimeter, aiming assaultfuls at the doors, shouting through megaphones, "Step out of the vehicle with your hands up!" The doors hissed open. The SWAT commander, sweating and tense, kept his rifle raised, waiting for a terrorist to emerge. Instead of an armed hijacker, Mrs. Higgins slowly stepped out, calmly adjusting her glasses. Following closely behind her was a single-file line of 20 high schoolers, calmly chewing on powdered donuts. The SWAT commander blinked, lowering his weapon just an inch. "Ma'am, where is the armed suspect?" I pointed back toward the bus. "He's in the back, under seat 14. He's crying pretty hard, so you might want to bring him some tissues." The officers stormed the bus. 2 minutes later, they dragged the hijacker out. He was missing his shoes, completely zip-tied, sobbing uncontrollably, and covered head to toe in powdered sugar. As the cops hauled him away, he locked eyes with me. He didn't look angry. He looked genuinely grateful that the police had finally arrived to save him from us. The lead officer came up to take our statements. He looked down at my rap sheet, then looked at Marcus, then at Jax. He slowly closed his notepad and put it away. "Off the record," the cop said, looking back at the crying hijacker being stuffed into a squad car. "How long did he last?" "About 40 seconds, I smiled. Cop shook his head, trying his hardest not to laugh. "He really picked the wrong bus. We didn't get suspended. The school district actually sent Mrs. Higgins a massive bouquet of flowers for her bravery, and the very next Friday, she baked a double batch of cookies. The hijacker got 10 years in federal prison, but honestly, he's probably a lot safer in there than he ever was on Bus 47.